Hi, welcome to SteamLUG Cast, episode 17, season 3. I'm Hero. We're recording this on September 4th, 2015. With me today, I have Cheese.
Hi.
Bean.
Hello.
Are we going with Nart?
Yeah, that's good. It's my nickname.
Okay.
How's it going?
And Tim.
Hello.
So these are our special guests, Nart and Tim, from the Witchbean team, who are currently working on Assault Android Cactus. Let's start off with what we've been playing recently. Cheese, what have you been playing?
I haven't had a lot of time for playing stuff. Just trying to get back into the rhythm of doing the Necrodancer and Cactus daily challenges. Played a bunch of Airscape, which I'm probably going to mention later on, and did a bunch of testing of Megasphere, which is pretty cool. We can talk about that later as well. What have you been playing, Bean?
Just today I started playing a bit of the Stanley Parable, right before the cast here. It looks like that's going to be coming out soon, perhaps. Played some Crimson Land, another top-down twin-stick shooter. Coffin Dodgers during the... played a little bit with Corbin, some of his friends. Also checked out Risk of Rain. Monster Loves You, which I don't know if anybody else ever played. This was an old game called Alter Ego, where you start off at birth, and it was mostly text with a few icons. You need to work your way through life by making different choices and decisions that would determine different statistics you had, and would determine whether or not you could apply, say, charisma to an event later on. And it was just interesting to go from birth or life to death, and kind of see how a character played out. And Monster Loves You kind of does the same thing with like fictional monsters. And of course, I've been playing Assault Android Cactus.
As you should.
Absolutely.
Yay!
So, Hero, what have you been playing?
I've been playing way too much in the past 2 weeks. So, started off with a lot of Verdun, which is a World War I online FPS. It is deadly, but fun. Then played Risk of Rain with you, and also Crimson Land, though that time not with you. And just recently picked up Arma 3, which just came to Linux. We'll talk about that later. Played a lot of that in the past night or so.
So, Nart, have you had time for playing anything lately? And if you haven't, is there anything that you saw at PAX Prime that you thought was particularly interesting?
Well, I usually use Dota 2 as a nice way to switch my brain off, because it's a game that's so intense you literally can't think of anything else while you play. But I think that game's just going to be eternally kind of simmering in the background for me, or at least some form of RTS game. Otherwise, I've been playing a lot of games at conventions, and there's been a lot of interesting stuff at PAX Prime. I played a whole bunch of Circa Infinity, which is a really neat kind of infinite circle platformer. What the maker described it as kind of Super Hexagon as a platformer, and I think that's pretty accurate. It's really fun.
Neat.
I don't know. I've been looking at a lot of little games at expos and just trying to check them out, see how good they are. There's one there called Adventures of Pip, which was really cool as well. It's about kind of evolving through the stages of pixel art. So your character starts as a red pixel, then they go through the 8-bit stage and the 16-bit stage, and gain different powers as they swap between the different stages, which is quite neat.
That sounds cool.
I think that's it. It hasn't been too many games for me lately.
Understandably, you guys are a little bit busy. Tim, what about yourself? You been playing much lately?
Not so much. There's sometimes I've been playing through Persona Q on 3DS before I fall asleep. And then there's been PAX, which is kind of cool because I got to see a lot of stuff. There was in the PAX 10, which is funny. Like we were in this group of games. It was hard to even get to play those because it was so busy. But there was Dark Echo, which is a sound kind of sound-based game where all the visuals are based on things that are making sounds, and it was that was really cool. I like that a lot. I was actually playing some rounds of Dungeon League, I think, which was I think it's just gone into early access. It's kind of I'm trying to think how it played now, but you've got up to 4 players, and the objectives keep changing. Like, so you have it's kind of team-based, or can be team-based. It can be versus, and it's kind of this really nice pixel art style with a good lighting model. So it's like that kind of, I guess, that modern pixel where it's not pixels, but it's normal map shaded, but pixel art. And yeah, it was just really fun.
Yeah, nice. It's always cool when people take sort of older existing styles of art creation or content creation, then apply new methodologies to create something interesting.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Megasphere. Was it Megasphere? Yeah, so it's kind of similar. I mean, Megasphere kind of takes it to a whole new level, but it's that kind of style of pixels, but not as you know them.
I think the first game I saw that was trying to do that was Legend of Dungeon, where it had that kind of nice 3D lighting on a blocky pixelated world.
Yeah, that's a really cool example. I've been playing that a little bit, not much, but I love the animation in it. It's really cool. And also, like, going back even a bit further, I always liked the stuff that puppy games do, like particularly with Revenge of the Titans. It's got this kind of very old school feel to it, but using a lot of newer techniques.
Right, like a retro futuristic pixel art, but not traditional pixel art.
It's kind of like how you have low poly as the upcoming in vogue art style, but it's not really low poly. It's kind of like nice shape, chamfered edges and things, and glows and effects. So you're it's not like low poly when we actually did low poly.
Right.
Yeah, it's like a romanticization of low poly, I guess.
Or new wave, as Zero Def describes it.
That's cool too. So before we dive into the main show content, we're going to have a focus chat with our special guests, Tim Dawson and Nart.
That works.
Sorry, man. And we're going to talk about Assault Android Cactus, which is a game that you guys have been working on for a number of years now. Do you want to give it, to start off with, do you want to give us the elevator pitch of Cactus? What is Cactus about, for those who haven't heard of it?
Cactus is a sci-fi twin-stick shoot-'em-up set in a vivid universe that blends the east and west styles of kind of intense action that comes from the Japanese style of shoot-'em-up with the freedom of aiming and movement that comes from twin sticks in the west. That's about as pitchy as I'm going to get it at 5 in the morning, unfortunately.
That worked. It was good.
Nicely done.
Were you reading the press release? Because that sounded really familiar.
I've worked on trying to actually use some of that, because the press release is based on us talking for ages about how we could best describe the game. But I put in my own stuff. I like to talk about kind of the East meets West. That's actually my thing. And then they worked on that in the press release. They took that from us.
Yeah, it's cool. And you can I don't know, I feel like those influences are there. Being in Hero, you've played a bit. You feel like you see those?
Oh, definitely.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, it's very reminiscent. The control style is Robotron 2084 and kind of all the modern shooters that came after that. It's kind of twin stick top-down shooters. But some of the bullet hell moments and definitely the style is very Eastern.
Yeah, it's kind of it was an interesting mix because it wasn't entirely intentional. Obviously the twin stick controls kind of go back to that Robotron Smash TV, that twin stick arcade style, which is a definitely a Western genre. It traces forwards to Geometry Wars and Super Stardust and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the aesthetic and a lot of the effects and a lot of the feel and just a lot of the little touches come from a lot of the top-down shooters I play that are predominantly Japanese. So it ended up being this fusion, not out of some sort of kind of plan, but just because I was mixing in all the things that felt good and that I thought were cool.
So, Nart, when you joined us for Season 1, Episode something, way back in the beginning.
13.
13, thank you, Bean. So yeah, we've gone over your history a little bit. So Tim, do you want to give us a bit of background about yourself and how you got started in game development?
Yeah. So I guess coming out of high school, or maybe even earlier than that, I really wanted to get into games. It seemed like something that just fascinated me, and I got my first job at Ratbag in Adelaide, actually. And I started as a cinematic artist. At that point, I'd been doing a lot of 3D, and I wanted a job as a character model. Actually, that's what I wanted to be. But they offered me a job as a junior cinematic artist or something. So I was like, "That's me. I'll wear the hat." And no, my first game I worked on was called was Dukes of Hazzard: Return of the General Lee. It was a licensed Dukes of Hazzard game based on the original series, released around about the time that the new movie came out that we didn't know about during development.
Wow, that must have turned out to be an interesting situation to be in.
Yeah, I joined the project, I think it was the day before we went alpha. So I got to see the entire project on fire. A lot of people get to see how a project starts. My first experience in games was seeing how a project finishes, which was kind of revealing actually, because you get to see everyone's dreams crumbling basically. And we got it out, and the game did all right. It did so well that Ubisoft stopped telling us the sales figures, so they didn't have to risk paying us royalties.
Wow.
And I'm not sure if that's libel or whatever the terminology is now. But anyway, let's keep going. And after that, Ratbag worked on a number of projects. I worked on a whole bunch of projects, did a whole bunch of really, really good work, and they never got to see the light of day. The project got closed, and Dukes of Hazzard ended up being Ratbag's final game. After that, I ended up at Team Bondi in Sydney, working on LA Noire. A whole bunch of us went across actually. They basically flew across and did a recruiting pitch in Adelaide. And so I joined there as a animator at that point. I'd switched to gameplay animation while I was at Ratbag and was really focused on gameplay animation. And so after about a year and a bit there, I ended up actually leaving to go to Pandemic because it was starting to do my head in. It was a really bad place to work. So very, very oppressive actually. I don't know if people have heard stories about the development of LA Noire, but as far as I could tell, they're all things that I either saw or would believe happened. It sounded very plausible that this was the working environment. So it was not the greatest place to actually work. Unfortunately, the project had a lot going for it. It was a really exciting thing. It was a game that not a lot of people were kind of making. So it was a real shame that that's how it was kind of going down. And then at Pandemic, worked on a cancelled movie tie-in for a while, and then it got cancelled, as I spoiled, before bouncing out working at Tantalus Brisbane for a little bit, and then I bounced into Sega Studios Australia, which was formerly Creative Assembly Australia, I think it was just Creative Assembly, wasn't it?
Yeah, at the time.
Yeah, and that's where I was working on Olympics with Nart, and briefly crossed paths with Jeff, and and then after that we worked on the start of Mickey Castle of Illusion, and I quit during that and spent a little bit of time at Kickstarter, which was like a free-to-play company that had recently set up a studio in Brisbane before jumping into independent development. So that's been my company small intestine path.
And it's interesting to sort of see there's a lot of cumulative industry experience across the team. Nart as well has had a bit of a path through the industry, and Jeff has worked on so many things.
It's kind of interesting for us that we really only spent a short amount of time together, the three of us at Sega, but we clearly kind of liked the way that each of us worked, and that's why we decided to work together in the end. Tim and I spent maybe 2 years together, I think, but Jeff, Tim, and I together, it was only like a 6-month window that the three of us were actually there at the same time.
So how long was that, time-wise, was that between, working on, I guess it was Castle of Illusion at the time, and then later coming back to form Witchbeam?
So Jeff actually left while we were still working on the Olympics game. So it was a couple of years between drinks, as they say, when we met up with Jeff and started working with him again. But for us on Castle of Illusion, it was about 6 to 9 months, I think. Tim left halfway through the project. I stayed on a little bit later. And then yeah, we reunited and quit our jobs in February 2013. Started this crazy little endeavor they call making independent video games, which I would not necessarily recommend to anyone, but I've enjoyed it.
And so Cactus itself also had a bit of a history that, or as a character, that predated the game. Tim, do you want to talk a bit about the origins of Cactus?
Yeah, so funnily enough, the original drawing of Cactus, I was drawing her back in 2003, I think. So she was like predates the game by a good 10 years. I originally drew this was back when I was doing a webcomic, and I drew a lot more. I was a lot more prolific with stuff, and there was I think it was a weekly art contest. That there was a site that a few of us were involved in, and and so I came up with this android for that. I think it was like because the theme was something about like sci-fi or something like that. And I was like, yeah, I know what would be a good sci-fi thing. This kind of kick-ass battle android that loves heavy weapons and doesn't is really cheerful. And so that was the first picture of Cactus, and I kind of kept drawing from there and iterated on it for a bit. At some point, I gave her a nemesis, which was this black armored version who had the gun arm on the other side with a knife. And and so years later, when it came to doing an action game, I thought, well, it just kind of suited her. I thought, no, this is her stage. Actually, jumping back a little bit as well, there was another point when I was working my demo reel for my first job at Ratbag, pre-knowing that was going to be my first job. I was modeling a character. I needed more material for my demo reel, and I was like, okay, I should model a video game character, a character that looks like a video game character. I'll model a zombie. So I started working on, I sketched out this zombie. I tried to make it look cool. And I was going to start modeling it, and I suddenly had this moment of clarity where I realized, why am I working on this zombie? It's like literally the most generic thing I can think of. Like, why am I wasting resources making something that I by definition don't care about? So I went, screw this, I'm going to model up Cactus because she's a character that's kind of cool. And so I modeled her up as, this is a totally different model to the in-game character, totally different proportions, and modeled her up. And she's on my first demo reel, posing and aiming a gun at things and stuff like that. Because it's like, well, if I'm going to model something, I want it to be something I care about. And I remembered that when I came back to working on this twin stick shooter, it's like, why not link it to something that already has connection.
I think it kind of stands out as well. Like if there's something that you're passionate about, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's a helpful starting point. And the funny thing is, the rest of the characters in the game, the rest of the playable androids, all came to be from the during the course of the game. So they're not existing characters. The premise, everything else, unfolded as the game needed it. It was just kind of Cactus that started off as this one, and she's changed as well. She's been adapted to the needs of the game, which is fine. She originally had jetpacks, for instance. They got knocked off because she needed more spot on her back for holding a weapon. But it's kind of that nice thing where you start with something you care about. It makes it easier to build it out and build the rest of the world around that.
So the game itself means a twin stick top-down-ish shooter. You previously worked on another game, which was a free game. I don't know if it's still around, but it was called Antibody Boost. Is that right?
Yeah, that was an interesting little thing. Do you want me to just start talking about it? Because I can explain it.
Yeah, go.
So this was actually just a little jam game that we made together in a weekend. I had this thing where I kind of don't like game jams as a big group activity that people do, because I think it's weird to compete to kind of crunch yourself to death over a weekend and see who makes the best thing. It seems like a weird reason to make a game to me, like the competitive aspect of it. But I like the aspect where you take a weekend and see just how far you can go in 48 hours. So what I did was I talked with Tim, who I know loves game jams, and I said, hey, how about we just jam a game out in a weekend, not at a game jam, not as a competition, but just for fun between the two of us. And what we came up with was this little arcade game. It's actually came a long time after Cactus's original concept. It's called Antibody, and it uses the original idea was that what if you made a game that used only the mouse to play, and it was like a frantic arcade game. So you use the left click was to shoot, so you could point your character in any direction in this little circular arena you're in. And the right click would move your character, but you could only move 3 times and it needed to recharge. So there was this whole like moving and shooting and choosing when to move and shooting while you move aspect of the gameplay. I think we designed like 4 enemy types and used that to create like an endless wave system, so the game would just go on forever and ever and ever and get harder. And then we ported it to mobile the next weekend because I wanted to see how hard porting things in Unity was and get some experience myself in optimization and just seeing how that whole process worked. Not because I thought it would be particularly good on mobile, but it was actually alright. We had like 10,000 people download it on mobile, which is pretty cool.
The funny thing was we released it as a free game on Android, which is like as a literally free. It's just here's a game, and so a lot of people like kind of where's the advertising? I can't even see how they're monetizing us. This is suspicious.
Where's the catch?
I was like, no, it's just free. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like people don't really do free games anymore. I think the concept seems to have died with the advent of advertising, which is one of my biggest hates in the games industry right now, is that we seem to be moving towards free-to-play advertising model in a big way, especially on mobile. And I have a thing. I don't like advertising.
You're in good company.
Yeah.
I think it's just assumed that you have to monetize somewhere, and like the idea of inserting an advert into the game, which by definition is basically exposing you to data tracking and data mining and all this other stuff. Like, I'm getting some CPM, but it's not. It's more than that. It's kind of just makes my skin crawl a little.
Yeah, and I think that like there's a weird problem with advertising where it's kind of an escalation thing, right? What's the joke at the end of Batman Begins? He goes, you haven't solved everything, you've just created escalation. Now we've got a crazy guy running around in a Joker mask shooting people with armor-piercing rounds because you have body armor. And it's like, well, yeah, that's actually how it works, is people want to advertise, so they'll find more intrusive ways and more abusive ways to advertise. But then people learn to ignore ads, so the ads have to get even more intrusive, even more obnoxious. Then we end up with advertorials and blah, 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 blah. And so like, yeah, we really didn't want to be a part of that whole ecosystem.
From an author's perspective, it also feels really weird. The idea of pushing content to your consumers, content that they don't explicitly want, is really weird to me.
Yeah, it's really strange. But it's the way it is for a lot of things right now. So that's probably like a bit of a side tangent compared to what Antibody is, which is, yeah, just a free little arcade game. It's set up that you're like an antibody, essentially fighting against, little disease things that are based on the visual style of what's the microscope view of some different bacterias and other stuff. I mean, it doesn't actually make sense, but it kind of makes sense.
I think it's interesting that the main character resembles a keg from Assault Android Cactus.
Well, the main character in that game is trying to resemble Tachikoma from Ghost in the Shell.
Oh.
Nice. So the question I was going to ask was, did Antibody influence Cactus's development anyway, do you think?
I think Cactus influenced Antibody more than the other way around. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, at that point, Cactus was a pretty solid prototype. So yeah, it was more. In fact, some of the decisions in Antibody were based around deliberately not doing what Cactus was doing. That's why it's move to shoot. Like you move in one action, and it's you have that cooldown. It's like to deliberately encourage vectoring and planning versus just making it a twin stick shooter, because I had one of those.
I think it's a pretty neat concept.
Yeah, it'd be fun to revisit and improve that a little bit and do another free release of that later on. I thought it's kind of fun, the mouse control, right? I like playing games that you don't need to use anything other than the mouse.
Yeah, you don't see many of those sorts of things, particularly not things that have that level of intensity.
It was kind of our curse as well, as that it got too intense too fast. That was one thing we learned from it for Cactus, actually. We really learned that that you need to space things out a little bit in your experiences, and you need to show a clear indication of evolution. I think some of Infinity Drive stuff, the way that the color changes throughout the layers, is largely based on like the way we did that with Antibody. The color changes as you go through the game, just to try and give you some sense of progression.
Oh yeah, that was a really cool thing we learned. In the original version, the game just kept going and going. In the first update, I think the one where we added leaderboards, and that was interesting as well to make a competitive game with leaderboards. It was a good little test of things. But I added in every now and then when you reached certain waves, the colors would change. And it was a small thing. I thought of it as a kind of cosmetic thing, but it really helped because suddenly people were like, "Oh, I'm making progress." Like, "Oh, I reached the blue stage. I reached the white stage." And yeah, it gave the game a lot more structure. And so that was something I kind of remembered when we were working on like modes and Cactus and that kind of thing.
So Cactus itself has been in early access, as we said, for just about 2 years or just over 2 years. You've had, I think last time I looked at the news list on Steam, 18 major-ish updates. How do you, like, retrospectively, like looking back, how do you feel about the way that you kind of structured adding content to the game and expanding the game over time versus how you would think that a game that wasn't in early access would be developed?
I think the main difference is that it's been a lot more perpetual polish, which is good, and a lot more perpetual balancing. So rather than trying to build the content and assess it, we're kind of building and assessing as we're going hand in hand, and very conscious that the stuff we're making is then going out.
And how much of...
Well, I think that's also...
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's one of the things that's kind of highlighted Assault Android Cactus as one of those positive early access experiences for those involved, is that there has been this kind of like this gradual improvement. You could see the progress happening over time. And when the balance changes would occur, the community was still involved very actively in discussing those changes. I think seeing that progress continue to occur is one of the things that has really made this a kind of positive early access experience for me.
Yeah, watching the iteration of the game over time and seeing things progress and you know, seeing, like, it's me as a developer, I'm kind of interested in seeing things very raw. But it's kind of not what we saw here. Everything felt like it was well thought out, and you know, you had that kind of level of polish, like you were saying, going into it as it came across. But there was still the opportunity to witness, you know, when you put in a new white box level, you can see the type of gameplay that you're trying to experiment with, and then you tune that up a bit, and then it gets all the colors and textures and all that kind of good stuff to make it look great. But people get the opportunity to witness that there's more than just the visuals and the final polish that goes into the experience. Like, it was an opportunity to see some of the thought processes behind you know, pushing unique gameplay into each of the levels.
Yeah, I thought adding, especially of the bosses, was interesting. Every time there's a new boss, then completely new way of taking them down, and the balance of the playstyles. But I've also heard it expressed very frequently that Assault Android Cactus appears to have less bugs than many games that are released, and it's in early access, so that's a fairly large compliment, I would say.
So in addition to our reactions, which we've shared just then, I was going to ask, like, what kind of reactions from players have you guys noticed, and how has that helped you inform the direction that the game's taken?
I think we've definitely seen a lot of what you're talking about with people saying they're surprised at how bug-free the game is and how kind of full the game feels, even when it didn't have all the levels or all the content or all the characters and things. And I mean, that we've been really proud of that, because for us that was really important, that the game never felt like it was a prototype, you know. I think feeling like a prototype is a poor way to do it, but it also seems like that's something that a lot of people who buy early access games actually want, is a game that's much earlier in its infancy of concept, so that they can have a bigger influence on molding it. So that's kind of been a double-edged sword, a tricky thing, that we're so sure of what we wanted the game to be, and we were so focused on making sure that it was that game, that it wasn't buggy and broken in ways. But it also meant that, you know, you can't then give people the fundamental changes that they might have ideas for. But a lot of the other stuff that we've seen from early access players is, lots of good ideas that did end up in the game and lots that didn't end up in the game that we may look at later. I think the daily drive came about largely from looking at the way early access players interacted with the game and wanted something they could keep on using to challenge each other, because the way that you perfect a level is so inherently kind of, you're working towards a singular perfection that you'll never beat again. You'll find the top score, you'll eventually have that perfect run, and then the level's kind of done. So the daily drive is a method of creating a challenging level that you can never really be done with. You can always try your in-the-moment skill set, which is great. And yeah, some of the other things that we love to do that people were thinking about were, like stats in the game. We had a whole bunch of stat tracking, just didn't have time to look at the implementation of UI and other issues that go along with that. But I'd love to show things like how many times you weapon swapped, how many bullets you absorbed, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, what about you, Tim? Anything that people have said or talked about that really came across strongly to you about being in early access?
Yeah, I mean, like, I suppose sometimes it was really interesting. We'd get like, especially the bosses. I mean, it was kind of cool that you were mentioning that about the bosses were these huge events. They took a lot of work to put in, and they often used a lot of special rules. So they were some of the more disruptive elements of the game, deliberately, because they're going to be. And so we get a lot of feedback initially on them. I think invariably we balanced them too hard, which was kind of our thing. And so we'd find ways to, we didn't want to just make them easier. We wanted to make them more, like, give them a little bit more of a gradient, which I guess goes back to the antibody stuff about balance and making sure we space things enough so people can kind of get into it. And so we get this good feedback on that, and we'd iterate on what people were reacting to and going, oh really, I didn't think that was a problem, but obviously other people are having this problem, so we can solve that. For me, the interesting thing was when people would make comments that were kind of valid for them but not for our game. So you'd kind of have to ignore them, because you couldn't respond to them. You couldn't like change the game to make what they wanted. And it was like a process of trying to give people what you thought they needed versus what they asked for, because ultimately, like, we're the authority when it comes to how the game's designed, and we have to trust our instincts. And so we would read every comment and take everything on board, but it was sometimes people get this perception that like you can kind of rock onto the forum and say, I'll have this, and this, thanks. And it's like, well, thanks for your feedback. We'll process that in some way and hopefully give you something that'll make the game better. But yeah, it was a really interesting dynamic in that way, I think.
It's really cool to see people getting engaged and enthused about coming up with their own vision for where a game might go, but it's just like you say, it's so different to how you would normally interact with your players when they see a finished game and they don't have the opportunity to imagine the possibility space of what it could be.
It also comes a little bit back to the philosophy of how I prefer to develop games as well, or how I would prefer to see game development. Working on larger games and seeing larger games. I'm not sure how much people realize this, but a lot of games are developed in a very broken state across most of their development. It's not unusual to come in like on alpha or something like that and find the game runs terribly, doesn't play that well, obviously is missing a bunch of stuff because it's an unfinished game, but the game itself is almost hidden behind kind of mud. And that always seems super dangerous to me, not in some sort of, oh, we should just make it better, but like if you're actually trying to build something, to not be able to see clearly what it is until it's about to ship seems just really dangerous, versus things like making sure the gameplay is solid and making sure the frame rate is good, even if you have to sacrifice effects, content, all kinds of other things. As long as the core of the game you can be assessed the whole time, you can kind of steer it easier. And that was a big part of how I think games should be developed in general, just because I think it makes it a lot easier to assess. And coincidentally, it worked out that it was a good way of doing an early access, because it meant that we were showing a game that ran well and played well the whole time, versus something that was like we were building towards a shippable game kind of thing.
So across development, across those large 18 updates that we mentioned earlier, are there particular points in the game where you feel like, or particular milestones that you passed that you thought were specifically interesting, both in terms of being able to ship something out to players, but also in terms of the response that you got from them?
I think hitting alpha was obviously a huge one because that was when we said the campaign was now complete. Having a completed campaign, all the bosses, all the levels, all the gameplay, even if it didn't have the graphics yet, that was a really interesting moment because I could play through it all and I could see, like, does this feel whole? And thankfully it did feel whole because I was terrified, is it gonna work? Is our master plan that we stuck to for 2 years actually gonna come through and give us something good? And then seeing players' reactions to that the full campaign was really cool. People going through and fighting the last boss, playing through as all the characters, starting to try and get purple S pluses on levels, which is when you S plus with every character. That was really neat. I think the other big updates for me of big milestones throughout the game, things like when we had all of our planned characters in there, which was 8. There is a mysterious 9th character that I'm sure we can talk about later, saying that she's mysterious. But yeah, when we rounded out our selection of characters and saw how people responded to the differences between all of them was really a nice moment. The 4 unlockable characters are all totally unique compared to the initial 4 unlockable characters, and it's really cool that they ended up like that and that people responded so well to them. What about you, Tim? What were the big moments for you?
Yeah, finishing off things feels really good. That moment of, because a lot of the time I'm just kind of heads down, working on stuff and grinding away, looking at the next small task to finish, and so just kind of suddenly have that moment of clarity where I go, oh, the full character roster is now in the game, or oh, that's all of the levels like ticked off. They're all available now. Or more recently, where it's like, oh, that was the last level that needed artwork. These are kind of really nice. There's that tangible feeling of like, wow, I'm actually signing things off, getting things done. This feels good. So there's some really nice moments. Or the first time, I'm trying to think, which is Justice going in. That was pretty cool.
Justice
was a fun one.
Oh man, I remember the first time I still have yet to beat the final boss. So don't have to worry about me spoiling the ending or the 9th playable android because I don't think I'll ever get there. But yeah, some of those bosses when they got introduced, it was fantastic to suddenly go, what is this? And actually get to experience something new as it was going.
My favorite part during the early access was towards after all the content was there. I showed my sister the game. She was visiting. And we played through the whole thing, beat it all. I believe we even beat Medulla in co-op. And she loved it. So that was really awesome, the way that we were able to play that through together.
That's fantastic.
It's interesting. I feel like there's going to be some level of disparity between early access players' experiences and those that come to the full game fresh. You talk about having the full campaign in place. I mean, a lot of us have had the opportunity to get to know the characters through playing them and a few snippets of dialogue when hitting the bosses. But for new players, their introduction is going to be the opening cutscene and all that sort of stuff. And as well, I see, like you say, like you put the pieces in, and sometimes you feel like they're tuned a little bit too hard. So like Justice, for example, I think was made a bit easier after I'd first played it. But my first impressions were of Justice in his sort of hardest form, and so that's going to be the image that I have of Justice in my head all the time. Do you feel like there's a challenge associated with that in terms of sort of bringing the early access players up to the same kind of experience as fresh players, or do you think that that's a good thing to leave be?
I think there's almost 2 different markets to serve now. There are the early access players who kind of want to consume the game at a higher level, and then we're hopefully going to see this influx of new players who are going to be corralled through the intro cutscene, through the progression, through this stage select. they'll have never known the grid-based menu that they could select any menu from level from, and that's a little bit tricky because the good thing about going to conventions as well as having early access is that we get to see like the dedicated players who have stuck with the game and keep playing the game, and also at conventions you get to see first-time players, and you actually get to see their faces when they encounter things for the first time. It's really easy to forget that Embryo is difficult for people. At conventions, he'll destroy groups, and it's kind of like, isn't this the guy you speedrun to kind of get your iron? Like, but
yeah, exactly.
And that's an interesting disconnect.
Yeah, I've noticed it when talking to players as well. There are players who have jumped in from the early access point of view, and they've gotten to know the game and understand what the game is, and they feel like they're on top of it. But then players who've just picked it up, they kind of see it quite differently.
Well, I mean, one of the most common things is, of course, the battery mechanic, which, for those who don't know, the androids are powered by energy, so they need to have, every once in a while, as you're destroying waves of enemies, a battery will appear. If you don't collect this battery, or a couple of batteries, the android powers down completely. One of the most frustrating things when you first start playing is that chasing this battery seems almost impossible. On top of everything else you're trying to track, there's this as well. And, like even my own reaction, playing for just less than a couple of hours, and my reaction was, this game is horrible. It's trying to force everybody to play in one style, and you have to make one path through all of the enemy androids. Absolutely not true. And I see it as if you look in the forums and like a lot of early access players, the battery is an integral part of the game. It's what helps keep that pace going, and in a lot of ways, the game is very forgiving about tossing a battery out.
Well, there are so many things that happen, like when you're low on battery, I think the battery will gravitate towards you much faster, and you've got this kind of buffer where you're almost out. I don't think it's a constant drain. I think it tricks you into thinking that you're a little bit closer than you actually are, and does a bunch of things to make it a lot easier than it feels, I guess. Is that correct, you guys?
Yeah.
We use a logarithmic fall off on the battery meter. So yeah, that last little bit appears to take longer than the rest.
Yeah, it is actually, it's draining at a fixed rate, so it's not actually draining differently, but it's displaying differently, so that you kind of you feel the dangers a little bit earlier than you otherwise would if it was totally the same rate across the entire meter. And yeah, we do a lot of things like the battery does zoom towards you when you're low. It increases the magnetism range. It'll even hop over gaps to try and get to you if you can get close enough to it. And as well as, that it'll drop from enemies if you're about to run out of battery and you're not in a kind of battery debt. There's all kinds of under the hood little tweaks that we do that are kind of irrelevant to you shouldn't have to know about how these things work, other than destroy the enemies as quickly as possible is the best way to get a battery.
And that's what the game is about at its core, I guess. Like when you're playing, like it's about keeping up the damage per second. It's about keeping up your damage output and making sure that you're taking down enemies as fast as you can. And that's what the battery guides you towards, I think, as a player.
Yeah, it's an efficiency puzzle wrapped in a shoot 'em up.
As well as the powering up your weapon. So you always should be moving, if not towards the enemy, then back towards where they fell.
Well, that's kind of counterintuitive to a lot of twin stick shooters where your goal is to run away all the time, right? So it's the Cactus's main mechanic is aggression is life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we want to put you in a situation where you're constantly choosing between, evaluating between things. And it's not a simple evaluation where someone can tell you on a forum whether you should do A or B. It's the situation is constantly changing and you have to evaluate it dynamically. And so the three things we do to move you around is stuff like, the weapon drops, the power-ups, which you may or may not need based on your context, the battery, which you definitely need at some point, but maybe you have enough time to circle around and get it from behind, or maybe you can shoot these enemies first and grab it, or maybe you have to dive into it. And the third one is the power-ups, which are static deliberately, so they don't roll around. So you can think about their fixed locations that you have to think about. Do I want to revisit them? Do I want to revisit them now, or wait for them to change into something more useful? Or hold them back, So there's all these things. It's like spinning plates, and this is on top of the basic gunplay, and that's what kind of gives Cactus its structure.
Yeah, the switching of the power-ups when they drop can certainly change the way the game is played. Sometimes it'll even hurt to pick up certain power-ups because you will more easily run into a stream of bullets.
It's always interesting to watch someone who's never played before. They're very intent on picking up those power-ups, and they get the firepower and they're like, yeah, I got the firepower, and no, I'm dead.
Then you lose the firepower.
Right.
Or it's like watching someone run through and pick up like 3 shutdowns in a row when there's like 2 enemies on screen.
It's good that players have the opportunity to do that and experiment and discover what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, I think someone mentioned earlier about the tutorial kind of being a bit open-ended, and that's because when you boil it down, there isn't actually that much we can tell you. We can kind of tell you the tools, and we can kind of hint as to what they do, but we can't even tell you their entire use because it's too broad. They're not designed as a lock and key system. They're designed as elements in this kind of larger thing you can do.
It's like the momentary invulnerability when you're switching weapons. That becomes a fairly I don't want to say it's critical, but it's definitely a useful strategy, particularly in the late game for boss fights and stuff. And I kind of like that it's up to the player to kind of discover that as they go. Was that something that was intentional, or is that sort of just that's how it ended up, and it's something players can take advantage of if they discover it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the origin of that feature was that the weapon switch has always been that little hop, and so there's 2 things actually. At one point there was a bug, and when you're in weapon switch, you're actually in a state which didn't take damage, and that was like just totally a bug. I fixed it, but then I kind of missed it. I realized I'd been using it, unconsciously to dodge bombs and things like that. And I was realizing when I got backed into a corner and a bomb was rolling towards me, I would weapon switch at the last moment because it seemed like the only thing I could do, and it looked like the character was jumping, and it's like, come on, And so it's like, well, that should be formalized. That should be a feature. So that's where the mechanic from it came from. The logic for trying to explain it to the player was a little bit more complicated. In the latest tutorial, we actually do mention it. We describe it as weapon switch dodge. And it'll be interesting to see how people react to that. They reacted pretty well at PAX, I think. A lot of people picked up on it. But I was always happy with people to figure it out as a kind of more advanced skill, because it's something you start to intuitively feel when you play it enough. It's you should be noticing these things basically, and it's not so complicated or difficult to get that it's impossible to figure out on your own. And it's nice to have a few things that you kind of, we can't just upfront tell you everything you can do in the game, because again, they're all tools and they're all, context sensitive and stuff.
Yeah.
It's really interesting hearing how that came about. Always fun when a little bug turns out to be an actual feature in the future.
So we mentioned earlier that now there's cutscenes and stuff in the game. We kind of talk a little bit about what players can expect from the full version of the game, and maybe also, if you're keen, talk a little bit about it, because it feels like this point in time is sort of the first time that you guys have sort of really held off on revealing stuff and talking about what your plans for the upcoming releases and upcoming updates are going to be. You want to talk a little bit about motivations behind getting the game into this sort of final state, and having a bit of a window before players get to dig right into it.
I guess something that's interesting is because the game has effectively been like we had a very ambitious, optimistic schedule, I guess, from the start, and so there's always been this feeling of kind of being behind the ball or being behind where I would ideally like to be, which was finished. And so a lot of the development has just been, as I finish stuff, I just chuck it straight into the early access build, like hot off the grill kind of thing. So, get a level done, bam, it's in there for the next update, And we've been developing like that pretty much the whole time. It's kind of that feeling of, oh no, we need to make sure we're giving this to people. And there was things like characters, which we held on to for a bit. Most of the characters actually got shown at conventions before they went to early access, because we were still tuning and testing them and making sure they didn't have horrific bugs and that kind of stuff, or just kind of tune their actions. But for the most part, a lot of levels, we were just shoveling it into the game as soon as we could. and it's obviously come up to launch. Now we're thinking about just trying to like kind of plan out the last little pieces and think about presentation, I guess, a bit more. Nart, do you have anything on that?
I mean, not really. It's kind of, yeah, well, throughout development, we tried to be really open with people about what we're doing, what we're working on, what's coming next, and what the plan for the game was. But leading into the final release, you know, there's a couple of bonus things, like the ninth character, who we never expected to have in at release of the game, but then we, you know, delayed the game a few times and kind of made plans to release it later on than we'd liked. So we have these little bonuses that I guess people might not be expecting, and I think the cutscenes are one of those things where people are not going to be expecting them to be as kind of full featured as they are. And we thought it'd be nice in this one instance to hold some of it back and give people a really nice reason to revisit the game when it fully releases. And that's a little bit selfish on our part. I admit it's a little bit, it's not quite in line with how we've handled development up until now, but I think people are going to appreciate that they'll come back and it will feel like a fresh game.
Oh, definitely. After watching the trailer, I was like, okay, this is enough to make me start from the beginning again. I mean, the most recent launch trailer with the cutscene in it is just beautiful.
And you can play a new character and get a bit of a different perspective on the story as well if you've played it before, because everyone has their own unique dialogue.
Or the mysterious ninth character.
You can do that too, but you have to finish the game first.
I'm so looking forward to that.
I'm looking forward to getting somebody else's save.
I'll send it to you.
So for anybody who hasn't seen it, the recently released launch announcement trailer contains the opening cutscene, or is the opening cutscene. What sort of work went into refining that and bringing it in? Because that's real time, isn't it? That's the in-game assets working as hard as they can to present you with a cinematic experience. I think it came out really well.
Cheers. Yeah. That's it's all real time. It's all in-game assets for the most part. The ship you see in the opening scene is actually the same geometry you see in World 4 underneath you, just scaled really big. And yeah, the cutscenes were kind of my personal kind of indulgence. I think I mentioned I started as a cutscene animator, and I moved off of that. I moved into gameplay as soon as I could because I love gameplay more. I felt as an animator I was being more productive working on the game logic stuff than the cutscenes, which actually put me at odds with a lot of other animators I worked with. A lot of guys were always like, I want to get out of games and get and work at Pixar or DreamWorks or something like that. I was like, man, I love games. I want to work on gameplay. This is great. But I did have this feeling that I kind of wanted to have another go at cutscenes and do some little cinematics and stuff. And so that was kind of my personal indulgence. And so from the start, from early on, I think I looked up some storyboards that were drawn in like February 2013, which was, funny enough, the start of the full-time project. And so we kind of mapped out the flow of the storyboards, reworked the script a few times to figure out. I think we cut it down, kept cutting it back a little bit because it was a bit wordy. And yeah, so we recorded the dialogue with the characters, and it's been sitting around ever since. We've been slowly working along them in the background, and then I finally got time to focus on actually animating the in-game assets recently, actually, and they came together really, really fast.
Do you have any plans to put that? Because earlier on the game had that there's like a couple of still images and a little bit of text saying that the cactus was responding to a distress signal and stuff like that. That very static intro. Do you have any plans to pop that up in the in-game art gallery? Because it's a nice piece of heritage there, I think.
Yeah, I just deleted that the other day. It's all on Perforce. I hadn't really thought about that. I mean, those pictures were storyboards as well. They were from the storyboards, so it's kind of nice that way.
Yeah, sweet. So the final release is going to have a bunch of new EX modes. Is it double what's in the stable build at the moment, or just?
No, just four new ones.
Right.
But some of them are pretty significant, which is nice. So Mega Weapons, for example, is a complete do-over of all the secondary weapons that every character has, giving them like a fun version of their primary is how I would say it. I mean, I think their primaries are pretty fun as is, but you know, when you have the laser and then you have the mega laser and it replaces the micro missiles that Starch currently has, and it's just a big wide beam that's very similar to Justice's chest laser. And I think that they're kind of an interesting way to play the game. They do turn off leaderboards, but like if you're looking for just a little bit of fun, particularly if you're in multiplayer or something and you want to have a little party experience, they're a really cool way to just change up the gameplay.
I remember when I first tried Starch with mega weapons, I felt like the amount of time that you had with the mega laser was just way too short. But as I got used to handling it, it felt like it was long enough. It's kind of neat to kind of come to that realization after developing the skill needed to use it properly.
Well, the thing with the mega weapons is that we tried to give them a distinct personality that's different to their existing secondary. So, for example, Cactus's Mega Assault actually has a ridiculously long duration and a lower damage. But it works out that, you know, your damage per second versus the recharge rate of the weapon is pretty similar to the Mega Laser. The Mega Laser just does a lot more damage in a lot shorter time, but then yeah, you don't get to use it as long. So if your enemies are spread out, the Mega Laser is not as good as the Mega Assault. But against a boss or something, it's actually just as good because you can kind of dish out all the damage and immediately swap back. And they're all kind of like that. So we have the Mega Railgun, and it fires about a second and a half of crazy railgun multi-fire, which is really cool. You get the Mega Shotgun, which is just one shot in a straight line. It's very thin, but you can take out a bunch of heavy enemies with just one shot, which is really cool. The Mega Seeker, which creates a bullet cloud. So her traditional secondary is a single shot that fires instantly in the cannonball, but now she has to hold down and fire a whole bunch of Seeker bullets that will then home in on things that are around. So I may have to give that one a slight buff at some point. And they're all just kind of trying to have a unique identity.
So the other EX modes that have been popped in, I feel like my favorite, but the one I'm going to use least, is normal sized heads.
Yes, normal sized head mode. Because we have big heads in the game, so you can't have a big head mode if your heads are already ridiculously large.
But that is the intended use. You're supposed to turn it on, laugh at it, and then turn it off because seriously, they're weird looking.
It's really bizarre. Have you looked at it, Bean?
Not yet, but I'm definitely going to. That and the rubber music.
Yes.
I'm kind of excited about the rubber music.
It's the creepiest thing on the face of the planet. It's like looking at Starch with normal sized head. It's just like, that's the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
I figured they look like little Lego people.
But it's funny, the character selection screen looks fantastic. It's like, as soon as I saw Cactus with a normal proportioned head, I was reminded of that early art that I'd seen on your Deviant account, Tim.
Yeah, the early versions of Cactus with regular anime-style proportions.
Not that they're realistic.
The reason that Cactus has those proportions in the game is because she needed a big head to be visible. Clearly in the game, she had more personality if you get those kind of shrunk down proportions. So it was totally based on the gameplay rather than the character design itself.
And then as Bean mentioned, there's a music adjusting EX mode that makes the music speed up and slow down within the game.
Yeah, every time you get wings, it turns into like high speed.
Like that.
That's pretty good. And what was the fourth? Oh, it's like same character?
I have duplicate characters.
Yeah, duplicates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is another just like little fun thing for people who like to play as 4 times Starch.
Right, exactly. And everyone's going to play as Starch now.
Everyone can have Starch.
I felt kind of disappointed when I turned that on and then turned on AI characters and didn't have 3 Starch as my wingmen.
Well, it's random. You have to keep jumping back between stage select and character select.
So the AI characters can pick the same character twice when you got that enabled?
Yeah. They work with the same restrictions as players.
Ah, sweet.
But they just roll a dice, so.
Nice.
The chances are pretty low across 9 characters with 3 AI, getting them all to pick Starch.
Yeah.
You could do it though, I'm sure.
I'll do it and get a screenshot.
Playing through the entire game like that.
Yep. So the full release is going to have 29 achievements, if we've got our numbers correct there.
Yep.
And there are a mix of sort of kind of gameplay challenges as well as sort of progress markers as well.
Yeah, I probably went a bit overboard with like little achievements you get for unlocking stuff in the codex and art gallery, but only by one. That's only one that I feel I shouldn't have probably added there. There's still a ton of little skill ones that encourage you to play different characters. And that's what those are the ones that I think are really cool in the game. On Steam, every achievement's kind of worth the same amount, but on like other systems, PlayStation and Xbox, you can kind of separate them out and say that some are more valuable than others, which I think is where a lot of our design crossover works for both systems. So yeah, we have things like, spend any credits and you'll earn a little achievement for spending some credits. And that's in there to encourage people to actually look at the EX options and the codex and all that kind of stuff, because anyway, part of my worry is that people will just play the game and not even realize those aspects exist, but maybe that's not founded. And then you have, your more skill-based ones, which are stuff like defeat Embryo before he can relocate from a phase, which means you need to grab a shutdown, hold him in place, and like just burst on him with whatever secondary weapon you have. So there's a healthy mix in there. A lot of the character-specific ones are kind of easy, but designed to encourage you to make good use of their weapons in the way that they're designed. So, Aubergine's one is to kill an enemy while it's being held by the Singularity. And that's pretty easy to do, right?
Yeah.
You just launch a Singularity, then you put Helo over the top, but it also tells you that you can use the Helo and the Singularity kind of at the same time, which is what we're trying to encourage you to do. So I think you'll get that one like the first time you play Aubergine. But it's nice as well if you don't play Aubergine, it just tells you, oh, this is how you can use her weapons together. And it's the same for like, Shiitake will have one called 7-at-1 Blow, which is to destroy 7 enemies in a single railgun shot, which isn't super easy to do, but it should happen fairly quickly when you're playing her, and it teaches you that there's no limit to the number of enemies that go and you can shoot through with a single railgun shot, which is kind of how she's meant to be played.
Yeah, and if you're having trouble with that one, just go play Vespula.
Yep.
The final game's going to have Steam trading card stuff in there as well. Have you got any plans there or bits and pieces that you can share, like in terms of what things we might see on the cards and what kind of emoticons might be or badges might be hiding there as well?
Yeah, I've been working on them at the moment. They're still kind of in pieces, but it's interesting. I've been talking to a lot of people, looking at a lot of other games, trading cards, trying to figure out what feels right for Cactus and what I want for Cactus. And they're probably actually going to be little scenes, because they're the ones that I'd like the most. Like, it'd be one idea earlier was just kind of do pictures of characters and stuff like that. But because they're not really, they're not trading card shaped. They're like, they're wallpaper shaped. And so what I wanted to do was make them look like kind of like nice renders from the cutscenes, basically that style. And they're going to be a couple little scenes, couple of nice little moments. I've got a few planned out. Some will be kind of like, oh yeah, and some should be kind of a bit cuter. It should be a mix. I'm probably going to have Holly riding on a toaster, because I think that art was cool.
Yes.
And yeah, for the emoticons, I kind of want to do a little bit of mix. Like, one of them will be little green cactus logo, but I think a toaster emoticon would be good.
Totally agree with that.
I know. I'm still thinking of the last couple of ideas, but yeah.
You gotta have the rolling bomb in there.
Oh yeah, that would be great. Yes, I'm gonna do that.
It can represent a lot of frustration.
Yeah, and you can just like spam it.
Right, when you're mad at someone, spam it everywhere.
In some message. Yeah.
Nice. We alluded earlier to the mysterious ninth character, and I don't think it's really a good idea to linger too much on their identity. But in terms of implementation, did this character specifically offer any challenges above what you were already faced when working on the other characters in terms of making it playable within the context of all of the existing levels?
Yes.
Yeah. So, we can't really go into specifics without revealing too much, but I think every character is exponentially more difficult than the last due to the necessity of balancing them across the entire game and against all the other characters. And then specifically, the weapons for this character were somewhat problematic at times when they're under player control to like just figure out what the hell they're gonna do. And yeah, like
It's like
it's easy to design something that like I'm not gonna break because I know the limitations of it, but yeah, they can be tricky things where when someone plays them and they do something that you didn't expect.
How long did it take you to kind of nail down the gameplay that character would have? Do you feel?
I mean,
it's kind of been ongoing, actually.
yeah.
They've had major changes up until recently where we kind of keep finding edge cases or issues and just kind of reworking things to make it more solid and play the way we want.
We seem to just be making the characters increasingly harder to create and balance as we go along. Oh, I know, we'll just have a character who doesn't have a gun and controls a robot that moves around the screen, and let's figure out how to do that. Oh, how about we have a character who has a primary weapon that can shoot an infinite number of enemies? Let's just balance that. Or how about a character with a giant drill and their whole gameplay is built around like pushing through enemies while holding a big one? Let's just balance that. So I don't know, we're not very smart when it comes to making characters that are easy to implement.
What was that? There's a big desire to push the envelope a lot. Like, we don't want to just add in a bigger gun. Peanut's rocket drill was really interesting, actually, because it's the first weapon that moves the character around like that, and also it can also move enemies. And so you have to kind of solve from a top level design. Obviously, some enemies can't be moved, like turrets are designed never to be able to be relocated. That's part of their design. Bosses move, but they're not designed to be moved by the player, so both of them have to be like stationary drills. So you go, okay, that's okay. And you've got big enemies, they can be moved across the stage. But what happens when an enemy gets their physics forcibly relocated by another system? That's basically an edge case for like getting popped out of physics or all kinds of other issues. So there's a whole bunch of like edge cases and refinement stuff that had to go into to fix those things, and it was kind of a huge mess. But at the end of the day, being able to drill a bomber into a wall was awesome. So it's kind of like that was what kept me going with it.
Yeah, I talked about it before. I think back in the first episode that you joined us for, Nart, and certainly in the things that I've written about Cactus over the years. I'm always impressed by the level of disparity that the gameplay that each character offers. Like, there's just not a lot of overlap between them, and they all feel like they're very distinct and unique. That's like really, really impressive. And to be able to maintain that across the game, when, like you say, every time you add one in, the amount of balancing effort has been dramatically increased. Because not only are you making it so that they can play in the levels, in the existing levels, you want to make sure that they don't end up with scores that crazy outweigh what other characters would have. Yeah, it's just really impressive to be able to maintain that across the course of how many levels? It's like 20 something levels and 9 characters. It's crazy.
25 plus the other modes.
Yeah,
25.
Yeah, it's very tricky. I don't know what more to say about that. I mean, especially talking about the new character, we can't really say too much because we want to surprise people when the game comes out, but I'm really proud of how it's gone. And part of that is with this one we actually worked with some of the people, some of the experts from our community who play the game to try and get an idea for balancing these elements. And we do everything we can, and then we put it out there and see how are people going to exploit what they do.
And what sort of response have you had from those expert players?
It's pretty good. I think they were concerned, and then they weren't concerned, and they go through the whole gamut of emotions as well when you're figuring something out. So when you put something like that in one of their hands, you have to just leave it be for a little while, because the first reaction is going to be, oh, this doesn't quite work, it's not quite good enough. And then a day later it's like, oh, if I do this and I do this and I do this, yeah, it's actually really good. So there's a mix.
It's interesting with character balance like that, because what we want is all the characters to be equally viable at the top level. So if you're playing the character as best as you can, we want that to align with the other characters being played as the best you can, which inherently means that an interesting character that does something strange will feel weak at first, because you'll go, well, I can't play them like this other character. but then over time they'll get stronger again. And if we make them feel right from the beginning, then they'll become too powerful if they've got some odd gameplay quirk. So it's a really interesting problem to solve. It's a lot like fighting game design, actually, like balancing characters and a more complex game like that.
A little aside, there's a game that I mentioned earlier, Airscape, happens to have a cactus Easter egg in that. You got any thoughts on Airscape or cactus having an appearance in there?
I love Airscape. I think it's great. I think more people need to play Airscape because it's one of the cleverest platformers to come out in the last few years. And we were thrilled when Daniel asked about, potentially having a cameo of cactus characters in the game. It's like a little Easter egg, yeah.
Have either of you managed to discover it yet?
I haven't had time to actually play through much of Airscape. Most of my playing of Airscape was done at conventions on old builds, so I'm really keen to see just how far it's come in the full release. I just haven't played through it yet.
It's good.
But I do know what the cameo is.
I haven't managed to make it there myself, but I'm looking forward to it. Airscape's a lot of fun to play.
It's quite a big game, actually. It's
huge, absolutely huge.
Daniel just went all out on that game.
It's crazy. And it's like there's not only is there the core content, but there's a stack of post-end game stuff that ramps up the difficulty and expands out the content that's there. It's a massively impressive piece of work.
Yeah, just incredible, especially considering how kind of young the team is that's making it. Daniel started on it when he was 16, 17, and he's working on a team that's split across the globe.
Yeah.
I wish it had been picked up a little bit more by people, because I think it was a really good. It's an interesting story. There's a lot to be learned there about like the future of game development being these. I think with the way the internet's gone, the way that tools have gone more accessible, we're going to see more and more of these kind of teams that are working kind of disconnected like this, and the game itself is just brilliant.
Yeah. I was really happy to be invited to test that and get to watch some of its growth over time as well. The way that things have been refined and the way that being able to look at stuff before the final graphics are in and appreciate the sort of game design thought that's gone into stuff before seeing the final polished experience.
Very cool.
So before we start to wrap up, we asked when you joined us before what you thought the sort of biggest hurdles that you face during development are. I'm kind of curious to see if that's changed at all.
I mean, building the game is a hurdle. I don't know how specific you want to get, but everything in the game is a hurdle. Being 3 people doing game development, marketing, and handling, paperwork, taxes, submissions, all this stuff it's intense. And I think from a gameplay, from a purely building the game perspective, for me, the big hurdles have always been trying to make everything we put into the game interesting for people. It's really tricky, trying to make sure that every little bit that goes in there needs to be there and makes the game better for being there. There's nothing we're adding just because we want to add content, So keeping the quality bar as high as it possibly can be is huge. Balancing everything is painstakingly slow process. Designing new levels and trying to find their identity is tough. I'm sure Tim will have a lot more to say about creating all the assets, learning how to program, learning how to write all the shaders, learning everything that he does is just that's a world I don't even understand. But for me, there's the other side of it as well, which is learning how to go to conventions and get the game in front of people, how to I guess pitch the game. We tried to do the elevator pitch at the start, and it was pretty weak, but it was all right. So figuring out how to convince people that the game is even worth their time is difficult.
It wasn't too bad.
I think by far the biggest hurdle is just finding resolve, basically. Funny enough, I knew this kind of going in. I worked on a webcomic that had daily updates for a couple of years, and some other big projects that kind of required that kind of stuff. But it's a really scary feeling when you get partway into a project and you have to keep going. The gloss wears off, the the feeling of like this is exciting wears off, and there's just work stretching out ahead of you, and you need some way to keep going because if you stop, it just doesn't move. On a big team, you have other people who are working on stuff. On this one, it's literally, if I don't do a task, it doesn't get done, and it has to be done over and over again. It's not like a movie montage where you just cut to someone spending all night drinking coffee, getting stuff done, looking stressed, and then it's done. It's like, no, multiply that by foreseeable future. And that's really daunting. That's like a huge mental thing to get over and to keep going as well, and to pace yourself as well.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. I think I was discussing with you a while back. It's like the people that I know who are doing episodic game development, they've got that multiplied by however many episodes they've got planned. It's funny when you're in the middle of making a big project. It's all consuming, hey?
Yeah. It was funny. I know, like, I worked at Kickstarter, who were doing like for a free-to-play game, and I still know guys there, and there's no end to that game. Like, there's literally no. It's a live game now, and so there's just content updates. So they never get a sense that they're ever going to finish something. They're just looking at are they being successfully making money? What's the next event? And they just kind of keep going, and that that just seems soul destroying, actually. Just on another level, like at least with Cactus, I can look forward to a release. I can look forward to my updates and feel that eventually this game will be complete. Even if we come back and update it, it'll still have reached a complete point, which is nice. It keeps me going. It's a focal point.
We're almost there. So on the flip side of that, what do you think have been the most pleasant surprises that you've had along the way?
I think I'm too close to it to view any of the in-game content as pleasant surprises. I think
I liked when our game showed up in the Steam controller advert.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
See, that's the kind of thing that surprises me, actually, is when someone knows about the game. So it's not necessarily like the game itself, but when I go to a convention or at PAX Prime recently, and you're standing there and someone walks by and goes, "Assault Android Cactus. Oh, this game's great. You should play it." And they're talking to their friends. That's something that I never anticipated happening.
At PAX, in the PAX 10, there was the was it Battle Chef Brigade was also in our group in the PAX 10. And I think that game looks amazing. Like, the 2D animation there is kind of stunning.
My word.
Yeah, so I was talking with one of the guys and saying, yeah, all the 2D animation is done by one guy. And I was like, man, I've got to find this guy and tell him how much I like his art. And eventually I did find him standing in front of Cactus, where he wanted to tell me how much he loved Cactus's art and how much in awe he was. And it's like, this is really weird, but kind of cool.
That's so cool.
So on the Steam controller note, if you guys ever manage to get your hands on one, is there anything that you think that you would do for Cactus in terms of Steam controller specific implementation stuff?
So we have Steam controllers now.
Oh, you do?
The first thing I'm going to do is try and set up default profiles so that the dead zones and things are tweaked to the way that I think it plays best, because the default kind of X input configuration that it uses has the dead zone set up for a game that uses a lot of the analog range, and aiming in Cactus doesn't use the analog range, obviously, on the right stick. So that's the first thing that I'm going to do, so that if you play the game, you can go to the community profile and select the which being default, and I think they're putting in a system where I can make that the actual default. So if people don't pick a template, that'll just be what Steam uses when you launch the game for the first time. And that's pretty good. Long term, we would love to use the API and set up some stuff so that you can actually do like multiple people on keyboard and mouse style gameplay but not WSAD, actual joystick on the left stick, and then on the right stick the mouse aiming input, which would be nice, so that if people wanted to play that way, they can.
Yes, please.
Which is interesting, because you can do that at the moment. You can do full keyboard and mouse simulation, but then you've got digital movement, and only one person can use it because the game is set up that way that it only recognizes one keyboard and mouse player.
Right.
So long term, yeah, it'd be nice to set that up so you can have 4 people doing that, and yeah, definitely a default profile that really tweaks the dead zones. They actually were showing it at PAX Prime at they had like Valve guys who work on the Steam controller, which we met there. were down at the Alienware booth showing Cactus to people on the Steam controller, and it was just a really cool moment for me. Really cool.
Yeah, I was really excited for you guys seeing all the publicity on the Alienware Steam Machine at PAX and in the Valve video for the Steam controller. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, not something we expected to happen for sure.
It was really cool to see as well. Like anywhere that video was posted, people were commenting and saying, "What's that video? You know, what's that game at this
what's that game in a minute?
particular timestamp?"
Right.
Yeah, what's that game?
Yep. Yeah, we went through and answered some of them, but it was hard to keep up with that video. It went very popular very quickly.
And just to chuck in a different in terms of pleasant surprises. So I just thought of it then. There was also I think the first time seeing people posting really in-depth analysis of the game on the Steam forums, where they're like describing the way the features work, but in a way that is like how I think of them functioning, and it's like from a player who's just interpreted this. That was a really cool moment.
Is this a good time to do a shout out for Solaris?
Yeah, what guy?
So Solaris has put together a guide for Cactus. I don't know how recently it's been updated, but it's the most comprehensive, in-depth thing I've ever come across.
I think he wants to do a launch update, so he's been holding off for a little while, and it's just incredible. Truly, just phenomenal work. I mean, I'd like to give a shout out to pretty much everyone who played the early access and talked about it, but yeah, Solaris has done so much to try and help the community understand the game. And we maintain that you don't necessarily need to know the actual mechanical stuff that happens under the hood to know that the best way to play is to shoot everything as quickly as possible. But it's cool that someone is so interested that they want to deep dive the game like that.
I thought it was amazing that, I think Solaris has talked to you guys a little bit to clarify things, but my understanding is that a lot of, or the bulk of their insight has come from observing the game, and the idea of discerning this level of detail from a lot of stuff that is, like you say, behind the hood and not explicitly called out to. I think it's massively impressive.
Very much so. It's a gargantuan effort from anyone. We've actually had a lot of... I think it's kind of the Linux user base in particular is very proactive about understanding the game, understanding the elements behind it, and supporting the game. There's also another user called Naga Huntress who really helped us narrow down some bugs and things by just deep understanding of the game and then like debugging the code as well from the user's end, which has been amazing. I don't know what it is about the people who use Linux, but you're pretty rad.
Well, thanks.
I love it.
I think it comes from us trying to help with projects that we use otherwise.
I think, I don't know, from my perspective, I look at it and I go, wow, Cactus is a really easy game to be passionate about. It's exciting and engaging, and yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't ask much for you to really be excited about it, other than, play enough to understand it and actually get a feel for what, in the way that it's different from other twin stick shooters. The aggression is the key in this one, and there are a few others that have that same all the time. So yeah, and the artwork is fantastic, and the characters are great. So it's hard not to love the game.
It's interesting that jump to realizing it's about aggression stuff is an interesting point. For me, it's been really important that to make a game where there is a heart to it. There is if you keep playing the game will give back. My favorite games all have this property, all the kind of the crazy top-down shooters that kind of become kind of transcendent once you reach this level of skill. But it's in the current gaming climate, it's harder and harder to basically broadcast that, because you can't just tell people, oh, if you keep playing this game, you'll find it's really good at the heart of it, because there's a lot of games that don't exhibit that property. And it sounds, as a developer, you can't just tell people that your game's good, because all developers tell people that their games are good. But it's tricky that I think Cactus has that quality, and of course I do because I made it. But I hope, and a lot of our stuff goes into trying to encourage people to stick with the game and hopefully find that and hopefully lead it to them, because it has to be an organic thing. You have to find that for yourself in a lot of ways. We just hope that people will.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I couldn't tell you when it happened, but once it did, and I stopped seeing the battery as my enemy, and I realized how my gameplay could force a battery to appear. That's when it switched.
It's like that moment in The Matrix.
Well, thank you, Morpheus.
That's a good moment.
So looking ahead, you guys mentioned maybe doing updates to the game post-release. Beyond that sort of stuff, is there anything on the roadmap for Witchbeam, or is taking some much-deserved rest the highest thing on the list?
I mean, we still got console versions to get out, which we promised to people a long time ago, and we're not hitting at the same time as PC, so that's gonna take us a while. And then after that, it's just there's so many ideas. Game ideas are actually probably the easiest thing to come up with. Even really, really good game ideas. Execution is hard. Finding an idea that resonates with people is hard. So it's too early to talk about now. I mean, our ideas range from everything from randomly generated co-op horror games through to more arcade action games in a different genre, in a different style, adventure games, RPGs. My personal favorite is my Shining Force 3 respin with Cactus character, Assault Android Cactus Tactics. So we'll see.
I'd pay for that.
Any of them are possible, and none of them are possible at the same time right now.
Schrodinger's game concept.
Exactly.
If I may, there's one comparison I would like to point out really quick. If any of you have played Transistor, the jerks in that game are very similar to the Titans in Assault Android Cactus. And I realized that by accident when my sister was playing Assault Android Cactus and called them jerks. I was like, wait a second, that's the wrong game. But it's funny because they're very, very close.
Not quite by intention.
Yeah, they've got the same. I guess they've got the same hulking silhouette. The Titan designs were interesting actually. I knew from the beginning that they were going to create bombs. That was their role. They would shoot bombs out of their arms. And the earliest sketches I've got it around somewhere. They look like a walking boiler kind of thing. They've got a little heat valve on them, and they're these big. They look like refrigerators with kind of a little vent sticking out the back, and they kind of look stupid actually. They would just kind of shamble around with these little feet. And at some point, I redesigned them and gave them this kind of real triangle look to give them, that kind of big upper body, gridiron player kind of hulking look with the tiny little legs, a little bit like that guy in Guilty Gear, I guess. Yeah, it was, and that worked really well. Like they read really well in the game, and they loom above the kegs and stuff like that. But yeah, I suspect it's more of a common silhouette. The fact that kind of large, almost an arc across their shoulders. You don't see their head. It's just arm, short, arm, back, arm. Works really well.
Oh, one other thing I wanted to ask before we do wrap things up was, both of you, or either of you, do you have a favorite character in the game, both to play and as a character in their own right?
Carl.
So it was like Holly.
I think Carl has the right attitude. She gets things done. And she's got the best character design, especially the way her armor is like, it's much more slimmed down and kind of sheen compared to the other androids. So she's got, she kind of reminds me of Bruce Lee.
Yeah, she's got like the sports edition. There's the way I design characters is I like to make sure they all have something that's noteworthy and interesting about all of them. Like they should all be designed to be somebody's favorite. Basically, you should be able to justify why each character is better than every other character simultaneously.
So I'm quite partial to Starch.
I think she's a fan favorite.
Yeah, it's kind of zany character with, and I enjoy the gameplay as well.
She's got micro missiles. Who wouldn't enjoy that?
Exactly. Sabrina and Hero, you guys got a favorite character or a preferred character?
Oh, I'm still very much in love with Cactus.
Wow.
Yeah, still. I mean, I've gone through most of them, and a few like have a real hard time with Aubergine with the controller, but still Cactus. I love her attitude. I love that she's ready to get this thing done, and she burns it with fire.
She's got some of my favorite boss dialogue actually. I really like her approach.
I think every time that I switch to a new character, I get a new favorite, and then I switch again. I really like the character design, the dialogue, and the way the weapons are different.
Yeah, it's kind of feels like it's a tough choice to pick any above the other. They all, like you say, Tim, they all do kind of feel like they have the ability to stand alone in their own right.
I think if you like Cactus, she's going to be a little bit better in the launch version as well. We did some things. I tweaked it so that her flamethrower's got a bit more range. I think it makes her a little bit easier to play in the regular levels.
It's funny actually. Like Cactus embodies a lot of the she's the embodiment of the gameplay. Actually, she's straightforward. She's all about aggression and charging into things. Like both as a character and the way she plays. The flamethrower is kind of the most purest gun for that kind of gameplay. And it's funny. People often recommend her on the forums when someone's having trouble with a boss. It's like, just start with Cactus and kind of use her to kind of get the feel of the gameplay. And we get accused of, so there's certain androids that are better against certain bosses than others. It's like, no. It's you. You just got to get your head around it. But I love that Cactus is that kind of straightforward. She's the damage dealer. She wrecks stuff.
It's cool. They all have a lot of enjoyable moments and enjoyable gameplay. I find that Shiitake and Coral, I guess, are probably the ones that I have the most difficulty with. But even then, they're still enjoyable to play.
I think Shiitake might have been my favorite when I first played.
Yeah.
That's good, because someone else once described Shiitake as a support character and asked us in very aggressive terms what the hell we were doing putting a support character in the game that can only be useful in multiplayer.
That's so wrong.
Wow.
That's the thing. That's what I love, is that people will find a character they love and a character they hate. And they'll assume that the character they hate is bad because it's objectively bad, even though by design we want people to hate half the characters in the game. We want you to feel like half of them are useless because the characters are so unique that it's you who connects with the other half.
I don't want people to think my characters are useless.
I do. That's why I designed them like that in gameplay terms.
It's mean.
That person that said that about the Shiitake, the reason why they said that is probably the same reason why you say she's your favorite.
Well, that's what happens when you have such diverse gameplay between the characters, is that if it's so different that it feels alien, you don't know how to interpret it.
Yep.
There was one run for Vespula that I was particularly proud of. I put a video of it on YouTube. I was playing as Holly, and I think I got the second highest for anybody else that played as Holly.
Holy crap.
There's only one other person that beat me with Holly, and that was cool, because obviously not many people tried it then, and not many people thought that Holly could be that good against Vespula and then tried it. So I wasn't actually that high as far as a global ranking, I don't think, but I was second in the world with her in particular, and that was cool.
Yeah, that's rad.
Nice.
I do a lot of that too, where I'll pick a character who doesn't seem that popular on a level and try and place as high as I can with them. I think that's how some of our Stranger scores actually appeared. People assumed for a while that Coral wasn't particularly competitive on some levels, and now she's sitting at rank 1 on a whole bunch of them.
So is there anything else, Nart or Tim, that you wanted to add before we close off this portion of the show?
Thanks for having us on. It's been really awesome. I'm so happy that you guys feel as passionately about the game as kind of we do. It's awesome to know that there are just people out there who have our back. And hopefully the launch goes smoothly. Hopefully you guys enjoy the launch version, which I think you all should have access now, so you can check it out as we wrap up to launch. People can check out the game. I think waiting for launch and reviews and things is fine if that's what you're into. We'll also be updating the demo at some point closer to launch. So yeah, check it all out. Hopefully you like it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us. You guys if you want to go off and get some more sleep, you're very welcome. It's been a pleasure to have you on again.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So, moving on to SteamLUG community stuff. As far as past events go, we had some TF2, we had some Sir You Are Being Hunted, Coffin Dodgers, and Terraria. Did you guys manage to make those?
Yeah, I was there for Team Fortress 2 and Sir You Are Being Hunted. TF2 was, as usual, very popular. There were lots of people there for quite a while.
Yeah, we played that new game mode, the
oh yeah,
Pass something.
that one was. I really enjoyed that.
That I cannot remember. Yeah, it was a neat take on sort of a ball game in the TF2 environment. still a little rough around the edges, but it shows promise. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not it gets as much or more development attention than what was the previous one, the power-up mode?
I think the player attention there matters a lot too. If the players latch onto it, that's going to make a huge difference on whether
Yeah, for sure.
it'll make it or not.
And how did So You Were Being Hunted go? Because that's multiplayer's new to that game, right?
Yeah, that's actually still in beta, so that's not something we usually do, where we have to opt into a beta for our events. And I hosted the game. You can actually increase the player limit, so I think we had 6 people there from SteamLUG and 1 person who guessed our super secret SteamLUG password, which is SteamLUG. But that was cool. We played it very cooperatively, which made it fairly easy, but we were able to coordinate our attacks on robots and so on to beat the game a couple times. They also added some more content to that since the last time I played the multiplayer beta, so that was surprising the first time I was taken down by a dog again.
Cool. And Bean, did you manage to make any of the events?
This month's been crazy for me now. I actually didn't make it to any of this month's events.
That's all good.
I had totally hoped to make it to Coffin Dodgers because it's another one of those games I hope a little more coverage than it's had. It's a silly kart racing game, but it's still lots of fun.
It looks like fun. So as far as upcoming events go, there's a T-Worlds event that I think has possibly already started, because we're running a little bit over time. There's a Serious Sam 3 event this weekend as well, and next week we'll be having some Hammerwatch and No More Room in Hell.
A note on the Serious Sam 3, that's on Telly's custom seriously casual server with the insane settings that we'll be playing, so it won't be just vanilla run-throughs.
So as far as other community happenings go, Explorer has made it possible to filter by operating system in SteamDB's calculator, which also means that public profiles can be filtered, and the roulette can be configured to show only Linux titles, which is kind of helpful. So if anybody's excited by that, check that out.
So, geez, you actually recorded the unboxing of Planetary Annihilation?
I did. I backed it on Kickstarter, and I got I think it was the $100 tier rewards, and went through the process of unboxing those. So if anybody's interested in seeing a Linux game come out of the box and with all its goodies, then that's there to check out. It's been a huge fortnight for me in terms of stuff. Yeah, I probably don't want to linger too long on it. But I had a
dev stream where
live dev stream. Yeah. With Escape developers Daniel West and Dieter Thunes, I think his name is. Call him Test. And that was a lot of fun. I had some technical issues that I didn't quite have awareness of during the stream, so the audio is kind of terrible. But it was a fun chat, and if you're interested in the game, check it out. Be aware that there are some late game spoilers in there. And I also did a dev stream for Winter's Wake, where I looked at how the game handles a lot of the game logic and stuff. And yesterday or the day before, I published an article sort of looking back at Cactus and what it's been like to be an early access player. So there's that as well, if anybody wants to check that out.
That was a really, really nice article, by the way. It was interesting, so interesting from my perspective to see someone who's watching it all from the outside versus, our internal view of everything. So thanks for writing that.
It's interesting. It wasn't something that I had planned. I mean, the launch announcement came out, and I was like, well, I should probably write something boilerplate that I can share around the place. And it just kind of grew into this reflective thing about how it felt to be a part of the game's evolution and iteration, like being able to sit on the sidelines and watch that happen. It's a big thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I feel really, really, really happy to have been able to see that, and it's kind of, in some ways, it's sad that people probably aren't going to get that opportunity in the future after the game's released. But that's a completely separate thing. Like I said, there's 2 markets to be served there, and it's time for the release market to get their hands on the game, I think.
I hope there is a market. We'll see. There's a lot of talk about the indie apocalypse at the moment.
Hmm.
I don't know. You do the best you can.
I don't know. I when you say that, like the indie apocalypse, I get this vision of like Cactus walking away from an explosion and never looking back.
Cool guys don't look at explosions.
I think you guys. I'm hoping you guys are going to be fine. I really hope that this is just. I hope it explodes. I really do.
Thank you.
Who knows? Maybe machines will do it in.
Yeah, you never know where things are going to come from.
So we also managed to wrangle a few other guests. We sort of did a bit of a drive and tried to get a bunch of people. We've got Simon Roth is going to be joining us to talk about Maya. Aaron Filippo is going to be joining us to talk about Race the Sun. Race the Sun. We're going to have some developers from Question, the developers of the Magic Circle, come to talk to us, and we're still waiting to hear back on a few others. So keep an ear to the ground there. If any of that sounds exciting, do tune in to some future episodes.
So moving on to Steam and Valve news, the latest beta client has some updates for Steam Music. It's now supporting FLAC, OGG Vorbis, and M4A.
And Dog.
You can call it OG.
Mmm.
It's tastier that way.
I was like, it's suddenly made it much more useful for a lot of people. It's like everybody I know has got most of their collection in FLAC or OG.
Yeah, especially among Linux users who are probably a little bit more excited about open source formats.
Yeah. And something else I spotted a few days back was PC World has put together a big list of all of the planned Steam machines that can be available at or around launch. It's one of those really horrible slideshow format articles, which I can't stand. But if you're happy to click next a million times, so you can check them all out.
I actually read the whole thing without realizing it was a slideshow because I had no script on, so hooray.
Oh man, I should do that.
Yeah, it's just a little overview of all the Steam machines that should be coming out. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the makeup of hardware that's in there across them. There are a fewer lighter weight machines than I was expecting. I was expecting to see a lot more things that were sort of more streaming oriented or geared towards having affordable machine that can do less powerful games.
Right, which isn't to say that they don't exist, but most of them are just powerhouses from the start. Just really powerful machines, which isn't to say that they're all large, like desktop size. There are many that are smaller, but still just pack a lot of power. That's interesting. So moving on to tech news, apparently Wine 1.7.50 has the first steps towards implementing DirectX 11. So there's nothing that can be used yet to play anything that uses DirectX 11, but steps in the right direction. Soon that should be available, or sooner.
Well, I mean, that's going to be important for some of the titles that we believe are coming or supposed to come, like Evolve. Isn't that directed 3D 11? And Alien Isolation?
Yeah, but those should be native ports.
One would hope.
I would hope that Wine has nothing to do with those, but we'll see. NVIDIA's released the GTX 950. So this is $20 cheaper, 20 as far as US dollars, cheaper than the 960. It still requires an external power supply, so it's not only PCIe powered, and has a really good price to performance ratio, apparently.
Also happening, Unity, the experimental Linux build of the editor is now available for public testing. I've been involved in I was in the closed beta of that, and I didn't get a lot of time to mess around with it. It still has a couple of rough edges, but it certainly seemed usable. I was able to upgrade a Unity 4 project and get that running without any significant hassles. So that's a big step forward for a lot of people who are interested in using Unity. I mean, I know a few devs who use Unity and run it under Wine, and that's having done that myself is a little bit less than optimal. But I guess a big thing is going to be being able to use the Unity IDE for debugging on Linux. Is that something that Nart and Tim, if you're still around, is that something that you guys think you might take advantage of?
Probably not. There are too many things that I kind of need that are Windows based for now, outside of the Unity editor.
I mean, in terms of debugging.
Oh, for debugging, possibly. There aren't too many Linux specific bugs that you need to test in the editor. It would have been handy for some of those specific crashes we had before. It's also tricky because a lot of the Linux specific bugs we have found are then even more specific to special video card / driver / versions of Linux combinations. So I don't know if having the editor on Linux is particularly that useful for debugging.
I think it's kind of cool. It's tricky because I don't really have a Linux development environment, but yeah, knowing it's an option now. Like, there's been stuff that we've been able to debug using the Mac editor because Jeff runs it because he's a sound guy. But yeah, it's really cool to know that's there, and obviously just to know that the community is expanding again.
Yeah, for sure. And you guys do most of your testing on a machine running SteamOS, is that right?
We use a couple of machines. There's one, we've got a Brix Pro that's running SteamOS, and also our Linux server, which is running just Ubuntu 13 something. So there's a couple different machines that we use. I really want to get an Alienware Alpha.
That's cool.
At the end of the month.
I mean, I might talk with Alienware because they've helped us in the past with actual hardware, and they keep using it to demo Cactus, so it'd be nice if they would send us one.
That'd be cool.
Right now we have an X5 one that they sent us a while back that we take to events, but it's massive and weighs a ton. And by massive and weighs a ton, I mean it's still smaller and lighter than an Xbox One, so there's that. But an Alienware Alpha would be amazing. That thing is like the size of a Wii.
Yeah. I'm actually gonna have to bounce out, guys. I'm gonna disappear. Thank you again for joining us, Tim and Nart. It's been, as I said before, great pleasure to have you on, and best of luck for the launch.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us, and good luck today.
Cheers.
See you, cheese.
Yeah, good luck with the rest of the show.
Good having you on the cast.
No problem. Have fun.
Bye!
So moving on to general gaming news, Duskers was just released into early access. It's not a full release, which is a very different and interesting game by Tim Keenan, who made A Virus Named Tom. It's apparently you're typing in commands in order to control some drones to move them around a derelict ship and gather resources. So it's very different in gameplay from most games that are out there. It has a Linux beta right now. You have to opt into that. But it's looking pretty interesting.
It's like an interesting take on the kind of exploration survival. Kind of taking away, your direct input to it. I'm really looking forward to this one as well. Tim Keenan put out a call on Reddit too, asking Linux users like which kind of commands do you feel should have to be in there. I thought that was kind of interesting. There's actually reaching out saying, "Hey, I want to kind of make this not real, but at least somewhat accurate." That's always good to see.
Linux users being the experts on terminal commands, I guess.
And so I think a couple people earlier mentioned Megasphere. It's now been released into early access. That has Linux support.
Yeah, so I remember looking at this game. It's sort of a action platformer shooty side-scrolly game. Sci-fi, sort of cyberpunk in its aesthetic. Universe Sandbox 2 is in early access now with Linux support. So you can smash celestial bodies into each other and play around with the physics.
I would just go and try to make a black hole as fast as possible. So Project Cars is apparently at some point going to have a actual native release.
Yeah, so this is
one that was announced a while back. And so what was this announcement?
They've been pretty quiet about it, but they just had a forum post not too long ago saying that they can't say much about it, but it's still happening and that it will be native. As far as other car games, Rocket League, which is extremely different, will be coming to SteamOS later this year. It was actually there's a deal for all Steam hardware if you buy the Steam controller, the Steam Link, or I believe the Alienware Steam machine, then you get Rocket League as well as Portal 2 for free. And that includes anybody that pre-ordered it previously. So that sort of makes it worthwhile.
That's pretty cool. It's really cool.
It's a really awesome deal. If you want to get a Steam controller, that's $50, and Rocket League is $20.
And it's doubly cool because from a developer's perspective, Rocket League is a multiplayer game, so it lives or dies based on its user base. So they're gonna like triple their user base or something, you know, same reason they did PS Plus deal on PS4.
Yeah.
And then because it's a multiplayer game and it has so much DLC, they can still, you know, like people can still buy things and they can still make money.
Right, still monetize off the people.
So it works well for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And that game's already exploding.
It's really good.
It's been really popular recently, so this is only gonna help.
I like that stuff. I wish we had a game that made sense for that kind of deal.
Well, did you ever play the original?
Oh, you mean super powered acrobatic rock? Sorry,
Supersonic acrobatic rocket powered battle cars. Yeah, yeah,
that's the one. Like,
yeah. I mean, that one's another one. Same thing. They gave it out in PS Plus,
it's a great game.
but there was still just enough add-on content. But yeah. So Rocket League, I'll bring it to Linux, and I'm excited about that one.
Oh, definitely. So Settle It was released, so it's no longer in early access. It's full release now, and that Settle It Rain is awesome. I looked at it just expecting to check it out for, I don't know, another half hour, then realized that I'd played it for 11 hours. So
That's a long time.
yes, I had a lot of time, and I blew it all on that. This is another cyberpunk. And a lot of people are drawing comparisons to Shadowrun in some ways. They're very different games, but I guess they're both top-down and have some RPG and party elements. Satellite Rain is a real-time game. Yeah, it's actually a lot closer to Syndicate in its gameplay. It's just that that's a older game and not as many people remember that. I don't remember that. I've never played Syndicate.
Well, and if they do, they probably remember that horrible shooter that they tried to pull off.
Oh, right, the reboot.
Right. So it's really tough to mention Syndicate without people thinking of that one.
Well, anyway, I'm really enjoying Satellite Rain. I know compared to Syndicate, it's a little different because it's open world, but it's still, the fact that it's open world makes it a smooth transition between missions, but doesn't really take away from the core gameplay, I would say. Not at all. Another game that I spent way too much time in was Arma 3, but this one I expected. So Arma 3 is now in a sort of limbo beta status on Linux and Mac as well. This is a virtual programming port, so it's using their Eon technology, and surprised a lot of people when we first started hearing about it, but we knew it was coming. There's a bunch of restrictions, including that it's an older version and doesn't have BattleEye, their anti-cheat, so if any Windows users want to play with the Mac and Linux users, they have to downgrade. But it fills a niche that would be pretty much empty otherwise, so that's pretty exciting. Hopefully they see that it's popular enough to push forward and have it graduate from its beta status and feature parity with the Windows version.
Cool. So JP Leberton, he was a level designer for BioShock. BioShock and BioShock 2. We also had him on the cast I think it was last year. He's released a small example project using. It started off as an ASCII editor. Now it's kind of becoming an ASCII game engine of sorts. It's called Playski, and he just released Endless Ladder Climbing 2. It's kind of a prototype. It's also him working through some things and making the engine accessible to game designers. And so he's kind of showcasing a little bit of what it can do. Oh, and JP was also once at Double Fine, which kind of leads into the next announcement, was the release of, back this up. So Double Fine's announced a new game. It's called Headlander. I don't know if any of you have seen the trailer, but detachable heads is a thing I like detachable heads, and sure enough, this game has that. The trailer looks incredible. It's got this kind of distinctive art style that the kind of thing you could expect from Double Fine.
And while they haven't announced any platforms yet, they have been saying that it should be coming to Linux. So, not official, and they've been supporting Linux with all of their releases recently, so it's no surprise. So, Obsidian Entertainment, who are the developers of Pillars of Eternity, among other games, have recently spoken about their experience with supporting Linux during the development of that game. And they were saying that it was a lot of effort, and there's a lot of challenges they had to overcome, and that it wasn't the easiest thing they've ever done. They didn't expect some of the problems they had encountered, but they said that they'll still be supporting Linux in the future.
Yeah, I think the phrasing was that that working on the Linux, including Linux support in Pillars of Eternity, wasn't worthwhile.
Yeah, at first it seemed sort of negative, but they came back to clarify that it was they learned a lot from it, and they still wanted to support Linux games. So that's cool.
So it looks like Starbound's had another update. And what did it add? Colonies. Do you know anything about the update, Hero?
I don't. I think this was one that Cheese was wanting to talk about, unfortunately. But as Starbound, the developers usually do, it's gigantic updates released after a long period of talking about it. So this has a huge amount of content. You can see their change log. So they have the colony system that you can use to expand onto different worlds. There's more than just having your home system. It's basically an extension of that. So if anybody's been interested in the development of Starbound, you might want to go ahead and check that out. Armello was released out of early access, which I believe is a board game originally, or perhaps...
No, it looks like it's a board game.
Okay, yeah, so...
turn-based strategy board game.
Right, so it's now on Steam, and I've heard that it's a fairly gigantic, epic game. The games aren't generally short. I've also seen some comparisons saying that it's a sort of Game of Thrones-like, but with animals. Because I believe that you're fighting over the throne, and there's one king that holds it, and so on.
I think that's pretty accurate.
I've never played it before, but I think that John Drinkwater expressed interest in having that in his event coming up for SteamLUG.
All right, so we've got like this one piece of crowdfunding news. My dog is going to announce this one.
So Everspace, which we have mentioned a few times before in other casts, is now officially coming to Linux. It's no longer a very vague question as it was previously. So it's pretty exciting. This is a arcade space shooter. Talked about it a few times before. If you want to check it out, it's safe for us to back it. So if anybody was holding off because of the questionable Linux support, now is the time. Anybody that's listening to this during the recording probably won't have time, so anyone that's listening live have time. And I believe that's it.
I think that does. I think it brings us to another SteamLUG Cast. Again, I want to say thanks to Sanat and Mishra and Tim Dawson from Witchbeam Games for coming by to talk about Assault Android Cactus.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Hey, thanks for having us. It's been my pleasure. Really, really fun to talk with you guys.
Well, thanks for sticking around. It was really nice having you. When we saw that you were going to be in this cast, I think Bean and I were both very excited.
I almost couldn't sleep last night.
I almost couldn't either, but that's because I had to get up at 4 a.m.
Funny how that works.
Terribly sorry about that. One of these.
It's fine. I actually be waking up around that time anyway because of the jet lag coming back from America.
Right.
So, if you got any feedback for us, feel free to email us at cast@steamlug.org. All right, you can also hang out with us on IRC. We're on Freenode in the SteamLUG channel.
You can tweet at us on Twitter at SteamLUG, or find us on Google+, plus SteamLUG, or watch our casts, as well as sometimes gameplay videos from our events on YouTube, SteamLUG. Hooray! Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh yeah, you popped alliance mode down there in the run sheet. Do we want to touch on the Stanley Parable?
Oh, we can definitely mention it. Might not be a bad idea to let people know the wine port is almost finished.
Don't you guys fall asleep?
Oh, I'm still here.
We have to keep talking. Gotta wake up.
Ready to go whenever you want.
Okay, I'll do the intro, I guess. I'm gonna redo that.
So hang on, sorry, excuse me. I'm also asleep.
It happens.
Hang on, I know where I'm going with this. Nice rambly question. Sorry.
Rocket,
I'm sorry, Jeff. Was somebody gonna say something?
Oh, no, it's all good. Continue on with the rap.
Oh, I was gonna say the joy of this is this is a live recording, but we edit it, so.
Oh, so I can just start swearing now and no one will ever hear it?
Oh, please do, because we do this explicit tagging thing, and we can tag it as explicit right away.
But if we're just gonna edit it out, then it's not explicit. That defeats the points.
That's okay.
Okay, Corbin, you can stop recording. Someone should probably poke Cheese.
I believe he's gone to the convention.
Yeah, I think Cheese is gone forever. He's just gonna eat his hard drive.
What if we kicked him?
That actually might be a good idea, because eating hard drives is bad.
Act of mercy.
Pretty much.